Hello, Global Theater. My name is Jerry Fielka. Today is July 19, 2022. We want to thank Rob Grant and his amazing podcast. I'm probably wrong about everything. It's an honor and a pleasure to be here with Danni Sonnenberg. Danny, where are you calling in from?
I'm calling you in from West Hollywood, California.
West Hollywood. I'm in Venice, so we're close. First
Yeah,
question. First question is, Danny, what's the best thing for a human being?
travel.
Wow, I never get that answer. That's a great answer. What's your favorite form of information? How it comes into you?
Film. Big
Film.
screen. The big screen.
The big screen specifically. I like that. You're my kind of guy. All right. So, why do you think humans collect or gather information?
I would hope it's to become better humans,
Yeah,
but I mean, I think now with the way the capitalistic world's going, I think it's to further and better themselves. But let's hope that we can better each other along that way.
it's beautiful. Do you think this need or want to collect information is more innate or more invented?
I think it's innate. I think we've been doing it since the hieroglyphics. I mean, then the question becomes which came first, story or language? And then that's like chicken and egg question. But I think it's innate. It's innate to draw, to tell the story, and to figure out new story or how the story continues.
Wow, that's pretty heavy. We're going to get into that a lot. Uh, these theater for the oppressed, Augusto Paulo from South America said theater is the first human invention. So that's funny, and it could be a tool. I've had people say lying. We don't know what the first human invention was, but you're posing a question to me is really intriguing, Danny, because you're saying to me, we don't know what came first, story or language. So
Yeah,
I'm asking the questions. I love it when people flip it and sort of propose it. See, this series is really about inventing new questions, and that's an important question. But onward with thinking and thoughts. Uh, at the beginning here, do thoughts create emotions?
I believe so because we think about how we feel, which leads us to feel other things. So if I feel angry and then something else happens, it pushes me into how I'm going to react based on how I'm feeling, based on those thoughts. So I think it's a constant cycle that goes on.
It's like a Mobius strip.
Mhm.
Is thinking more innate or more invented?
Ooh, that's a great question. I think it's innate. I think because I mean, you think of like Rodin and the thinker, right? The man or woman sitting thinking. I think we've always been doing that, and because we have to think to survive, and I think every breathing, living species has to, even the plant has to think how it's going to grow. So I think I'm thinking right now, right? I think they all think. It's I think it's innate,
Yeah,
but then it evolves because you change how you think. So
yeah,
then it moves into the other side of the question. But I do
yeah.
believe it's innate because we can't survive without it.
Yeah, I love anybody who drops art history references. That's pretty heavy, dude. I love it. Rodin's sculpture, the thinking man, beautiful. So, Danny, fill in the blank. I don't know what I think until I.
See what's
Wow,
happening around me.
around. Yeah, that's good. Yeah, McLuhan says, I don't know what I think until I say it. And then Joan Didion says, I don't know what I think until I write it.
Hmm.
Yeah.
I have to see what's going on around me. You got to do the knowledge first, then the wisdom becomes the speaking, and then the understanding of how it all comes together. So it becomes a three-part: knowledge, wisdom, and understanding.
Oh, where'd you get that from?
That's Wu Tang Clan. That's the Wu Tang. The hit.
No.
That's the hit.
Knowledge, wisdom, and
Wisdom and understanding.
understanding
Yeah,
is Wu-Tang?
yeah, that's one of their sayings. You look around, you see what's going on, You assess the situation and then you act upon it. That's knowledge, wisdom, and understanding.
That is good, man. One of my James Joyce teachers, he loves three things: Finnegan's Wake by James Joyce, Wu-Tang Clan, and baseball.
I love Wu-Tang Clan. Joyce, I only read the young author.
Yeah, Portrait of an Artist.
Yeah, Portrait of an Artist. And I substitute basketball for baseball.
Oh, nice. Hoop. I love that.
Yeah, I'm sure you would.
Humans, can humans think without language?
My answer is no. Because even if language isn't speaking, we're still miming or doing something. So I think there's some sort of language. It doesn't have to be the spoken word. The hieroglyphics were drawn, that's language. The story that's in our head before we utter, that's language. So I think language has always been there. It's just changed its form.
Dude, I'm learning a lot. I really appreciate this. Chomsky says that a language is not just words, it's culture, it's tradition, a unification of community, a whole history that creates what a community is.
I fully agree.
Yeah. What do you do when language doesn't work, when language breaks down?
Okay, so the thing about language is that language is both the disease and the cure. So you say something that insults someone, but at the same time you can say something that brings them back by saying something that appeals to them. So it's like putting your foot in your mouth and then taking it out. So we don't have anything but language. So we have to keep trying to communicate until we're alone, I guess, if no one wants to communicate with us. But you just have to keep trying, because language is also the niche that gets you to where you're going. And we move through that. It's our ultimate currency, I would say, even.
Yeah.
The word.
But you're saying keep going. So if language breaks down, you say keep using language.
Yes, you have to keep going. I speak 4 of them: German, English, Spanish, and Portuguese. And you just try to keep going.
Yeah.
You find other people you can communicate with, or you give a pause, but you got to keep using language. I think once language dies, we die.
It's beautiful. Danny, you got to come to our Finnegan's Wake reading club just once at least. He uses over 60 languages in one book. So if you know 4 languages, man, you got it. You're right there with him. You'll start getting all these references, It's complex. So your observations of humans in general, are we more feeling beings or more thinking beings?
I think we're more thinking beings, because we think about our feelings and that leads us to feel. But I don't think we could feel without thinking, because if we just feel and don't think, then we don't know what we're feeling.
Oh, that's funny, because Bridget Bardot says, when I make love, I don't think. And I'm like, good luck. How can you shut off your brain when you're doing the most sensuous bodily thing and you want to be surrendered to that feeling? But somehow it's sort of like meditation. They say, don't think about thinking.
Yeah, you just let go.
Yeah.
You let go.
These are 2 questions from Alan Turing, 1950s. Is thinking a function of the soul?
I would say yes, because if you think of Plato's idea of the soul, that it comes down, is brought down, and then it looks for everything that it's supposed to know, or that person's supposed to know. I do believe it's part of the soul. And for what purpose we were brought down or given the soul we were given to create on earth. I do believe it's part of the soul.
Amazing. His second question was, can machines think?
I think so. We're finding that out. I mean, there's recently an article, I'm not exactly sure where it was, but they found out that one of the AI machines that they had built began showing signs of recognition. So I do think we're going to end up evolving machines to where they can think. And I do think machines think. Like when you tell your computer to find something, it's thinking. I mean, I do believe they think.
Do you more pursue meaning or more pursue happiness?
Meaning. I don't think you can have happiness without meaning.
Yeah. Does the brain more detect consciousness or create it? Like, is consciousness there bubbling away and we're detecting it, or are we actually creating it?
Ooh, that one's a mixture. I think it's a mixture of the two. I don't think there's one clear we create it or we get to it. I think it's also another cycle that's ongoing, and it's a constant interplay between what we remember and then what we bring up from memory and what we push forward. And subconscious, conscious, and trace are constantly moving. And I think when we dream, like what becomes conscious is what we allow ourselves to know about ourselves that we come to terms with. So it keeps moving all the time.
Dude, you are smart, man. You're just nailing these right and left. This is fun. So, what, Danny, what's faster, speed of light or speed of thought?
Ooh, hard question, Jerry. I'm going to say speed of light. The sun still moves faster from what I believe than any of our brains can right now. Because if we had speed of thought faster than speed of light, we'd be able to solve so many of our problems already.
Wow. The poet Audre Lorde said, "You can't dismantle the master's house using the master's tools." Yvonne Rainer responded and said, "You can if you expose the tools." What new tool do you suggest?
So you have, I would suggest it's like social media in these forms as a new tool
Yeah.
that I would suggest. And then going back to Audre Lorde, it's her idea in the same words. You don't show your oppressor how they're oppressing you. The oppressor is supposed to know what they're doing to you. So it's not like I'm a German Jew, okay? It's not my job to hit the Germans over the head with what they did. It's a German's job to understand what happened and then come back to the Jewish people and say we're sorry for what we did. So, in terms of tools that we can use that are new, social media is definitely that tool,
Wow.
and the internet, because it leads us to things and ideas and thoughts that we hadn't been able to share previously on massive waves. Like look at the whole, like what happened with George Floyd, how quickly that moved through the whole world. So the social media is what enabled that. Those are the new tools, of the 21st century that we have in that sense. But I still believe it's on the oppressor to learn how they oppressed. It's not the
Yeah.
oppressed job to or discriminate against job anywhere. It's not a Palestinian's job to show an Israeli. It's not a black man's job to show, like a Klans member why. They have to learn that themselves and learn why it's wrong.
Who'd you learn that from? Or where did you acquire that knowledge?
I was a deconstructionist. So I learned deconstructivism at like 20, 21 years old, where you're constantly looking at the world through a variety of lenses. And you realize when you take away privilege, things collapse upon themselves. And how you use it collapses like a Jenga tower. Like when you take away privilege or why something, how we view something the way we view it. I learned that in college, these
Who who
ideas.
were who were like one or two or the main deconstructionist writers you learned from?
Definitely Derrida. Derrida more than anybody because I was the father of
Really?
deconstruction. Yeah, I read
Derrida.
I read a lot of his books. The main one being on cosmopolitanism,
Yeah.
where there's the question of forgive and forget. Like, if I did something to you, Jerry, which was unforgettable, you couldn't forgive me because if you can't forget it, you can't forgive it. And
Yeah.
only if I can. So we can't really forgive because we can't forget. That's
Yeah.
the question Derrida wrestles with in that book. Or
Wow.
another one is called On the Name. And the question is like, when someone asks your name, are they doing that out of ritual because that's what we're used to, or are they doing that because they really want to know Jerry?
Yeah.
And that's the question. It falls on itself again. These kind of questions we wrestle with. It was mostly Derrida, because that was the big deconstructionist. Derrida was like Plato or Picasso of his time because he was known
Yeah.
as a big philosopher while he was doing it. It wasn't like after the fact, right? He lived it. It wasn't like a Van Gogh situation where they realized afterwards how talented he was. He was
Yeah.
actually celebrated.
That's good. Martha Graham says Great artists aren't ahead of their times. They are their times.
Yeah, Derrida, Picasso, Dali were definitely the times.
Yep. Yeah, you said a lot there because, especially me, I like to say the person's name when I'm doing these podcasts and, make it personable. And it is part of ritual. And I'm
Yeah.
trying to reach, but if I can't pronounce their first name like well, I don't try to
Well, that's
do
substance. That's substance right there. That's the substance of like actual care and not ritual of just mispronouncing it and moving on. And
dang. I thought I was fucking up, man. You're saying that.
no,
Oh, that was beautiful. So, what new toy do you suggest?
I would suggest anything after an iPhone 13, iPhone 14, just because the camera is incredible. And you
Yeah.
can shoot your own 2, 3, 4 minute shorts, or that can be proof of concepts. I think this has changed the way the world functions. I've made 2 shorts now on iPhones, and they turn out really well.
Yeah.
And it doesn't have to be iPhone. It's like any phone that has a good quality camera that you can record with.
Yeah.
Something like that are compatible. I also, the secondary toy, my favorite toy is computers, like a laptop, a solid laptop. I use a MacBook Pro, but that's not to plug them. That's just what I use. You could do
Yep.
the same. You could do the same with, like a HP or a Lenovo or anything like that. But I think
Yep.
the laptop and the cellular phone, today's cellular phone with a camera, a good camera, are the best toys. Filmmakers' toys, and also like vacationers, travelers' toys.
Well put. What do you worry about when you go to bed at night?
I worry about humanity. I worry about like where America's going and where America's taking the world with it. I worry about the fact that we can't get like a climate change agreement, and we see how hot it is in London right now, for example. Like those are the things I worry about. I worry about like what kind of world will this be for the kid my wife and I want to put into the world, and then what kind of world is it for those of us, who want to persevere. Like the Earth is about perseverance. It's not about get as much out of it as you can and then move on. It's about keeping it for the next people and making it habitable and continuing that over and over. So that's what I worry about the most, probably.
Danny, what's the difference, or is there a difference between worry and concern?
No, I don't think there's a difference. I think if
Yeah.
you worry about something, you're concerned, and if you're concerned about something, you worry about it. They go hand in hand.
Yeah. McLuhan learned from the poet Ezra Pound that artists are the antenna of the race. They're broadcasting and detecting the hidden psychic effects of our inventions so that we can learn to cope with what we don't like about the invention. I asked you the question McLuhan probed his whole career. Why do we humans ignore the hidden psychic effects of our inventions, even though the artists are broadcasting them to us?
I think because of how good they make us feel. And it's like you take sugar, like when you eat sweets, that sugar to the brain, that rush, and you want to repeat it over and over again. Like the same, like I want to see movies again and again. Bless you.
Sorry.
Bless you. No, no. I want to see movies again and again. Some of them, like I watch like Old School over and over, or Animal House again and again. Um, or it's that joy that it gives us that we look past how it's hurting us, and then we try to get past it. We become like there's a Spanish word. It's called la dia, which is like lice, and we become lice. We use the system to make the system better. So it's like we cut ourselves so that we're sharper, but then we don't want to lose too much blood and go forward. So we use it to fix it, but we don't want to use too much of it, so we have too much to fix. But it's a constant fixture going on with the world. So we invent these things, we try to fix the world, but we're hurting the world if there's too many inventions to fix the world. But
Yeah.
it's a constant struggle, I would say, in that question.
Beautiful. Now, the Spanish word for life, L-I-F-E,
No,
how
lice, Lice,
L-I-C-E.
lice, because we're lice. We're like a lice in the world. Because we're sucking from the system to try to make the system better.
You mean like a bug?
Yeah, like a lice, like if you have lice in your hair, kind of thing.
Yeah, but
Yeah,
that is the Spanish
la
word.
dia, la dia,
Oh, how do you spell la dia?
Ladilla, la dia.
Oh, la dia is for lice. That's good. Lice. Wow. Do artists have moral obligation?
Absolutely. I think we have to. We can't just keep these ideas and things inside. Like, if Picasso knew he was capable of making a Guernica, by all means, he had to share that Guernica to show how wrong the bombing was, to show how horrible war is. If I'm capable of, if Spielberg was capable of making Schindler's List, by all means, he's got to do it to show what's going on. I do believe and we also have a moral obligation to give back, like because of what kind of paychecks these people are getting. I'm not there yet, but when I will be giving back. I will be teaching people how to create and do things, mostly in underprivileged areas. But I do think we have to give back. I do think there's a moral obligation, because it's the masses that come to see what we're doing, and we're a part of the public too, and we have to make the public better. Absolutely.
Wow. Beautiful. And so, did you know about, and I pronounce it Guernica, I like how you pronounce it. Picasso's finishing the painting in his Paris studio, and a German government official's touring the artist's studios. And he walks in and he looks at the painting and he looks at Picasso and he says, "Did you do that?" And Picasso goes, "No, you did."
That's true, Picasso, right there. I never knew that. That's beautiful. You shared that with me.
Are you more afraid of new ideas or more afraid of old ideas?
I'm more afraid of old ideas. And I'll give you an example. So in Hollywood, you see all these sequels being made. And what happens? It's people holding on to a product they already made, and it's blocking people from creating new ideas and getting new ideas out there. And we
Yeah.
need to build on old ideas, but we need new ideas. And if old ideas block new ideas, we're going to be in a vacuum with nothing.
Yeah.
We need new ideas for sure, and we need old ideas to give way to new ideas. Absolutely.
Beautiful. Can you conjure up your earliest memory ever or one of them?
Just sitting with my dad, I was like maybe 2, 3 years old, and he was doing a slideshow. My father was a gastroenterologist; he still is, and he was doing a slideshow for a talk in Germany, and he put in a picture of Mickey Mouse because he knew I was watching the slideshow, and so I saw Mickey Mouse in the slideshow.
That is cool. Is memory more a curse or more a blessing?
It's a blessing,
Yeah.
because I agree with Nipsey Hussle says that you experience people. The rapping king of Los Angeles that we lost 3 years ago, he says that we experience people, and I agree with that, and I think memory is how we experience people over the long term. So I think memory is a complete blessing.
Tell me someone within your immediate family, then outside your immediate family, just briefly, who had an impact on you like a role model, and what specifically was that impact?
So inside my family is my grandfather. My grandfather survived the Holocaust, and by the time he was 19, he had gotten onto the last fruit boat out of Holland into British Mandate Palestine, and his whole family was gone. So when I think of any challenge in my life, it's nowhere near as grueling as what my grandfather went through. So my life is easy. No matter if I'm trying to get a script made on set, or trying to get people together or solve problems in my family, none of it is as difficult as what my grandfather already went through. So I know my life is easy. And he had an enormous impact upon me just rebuilding. I had him in my life until I was 22 years old. So we had a lot of time together. And I got, during my 4 years of college, I lived with him in Germany during the summer, so I got to know his story. I got him rubbing off on me. Um, the two people outside that influenced me, one is my producing partner. His name is the Prodigal Son, and he was of the first group that Wu Tang produced, called the Sons of Man. And he's just a complete fighter. And he's been through the music world, he's been through the film world, and just a fantastic person to work with. The other is Oliver Grant, who was a founding member and executive producer of Wu Tang. And I've had the luck of meeting these people and forging relationships with these people. And they've influenced me in ways that I can't even imagine.
Wow.
From a business sense and from a work hard sense, because they essentially also came from nothing and built a hip hop dynasty, and it's amazing what they accomplished. And it really inspires me on a day to day. Their music since I was 12 has been like a soundtrack to my life.
Beautiful. Did your parents raise you a particular religion?
I grew up culturally Jewish. So culturally Jewish means you have a bar mitzvah because people died for you to be here, but it wasn't like you have to go to temple or we keep kosher or those kinds of things. It was more like learn about where you're from, learn the hardships your family went through, and then go out and marry anyone you want or whom you love. And it doesn't have to be Jewish or anything like that. That's how I was raised. Just completely open, know where you came from.
Do you pray?
Yeah, I do pray. I pray like I pray to. I believe in all the gods. So I believe in I believe in the God in the Quran. I believe in the God in the Bible. I believe in the God in Torah. I pray, and sometimes I name by name those gods, together. Because I don't think there's one right path. I think we're
Yeah.
all together on like a path.
Yeah. My wife has a bumper sticker. My God loves your God.
Yeah, yeah, exactly.
If God does exist, what would you like God to say to you after you die?
At least you tried.
That's great. Do evil people exist, or does evil use people as a vehicle?
I'm going to say evil uses people as a vehicle, because like let's say a lot of people, let's look at Putin, right? A lot of people say Putin is evil, quote unquote, but before him there was evil, and there was evil before that. So I think evil uses people as a vehicle, or people come upon the notion of evil and become bad. I don't think that there's evil people like in that way. I think people come across it.
Yeah. And the follow-up question is, Danny, how do you advise someone to deal with an enemy? And first, I'm going to say a few modern thinkers. Alan Watts says, if you acknowledge your enemy, you empower them. Coppola stole from the mob and the samurai. Keep your friends close and your enemies closer. JFK said, forgive your enemy, but don't forget their name. And Fellini says, I need an enemy. So it's a lot of thoughts. The basic question is, how do you advise someone to deal with an enemy? But first, how would you respond to Alan Watts? If you acknowledge your enemy, you empower them.
I understand where he's coming from, because if someone's being a nuisance to you and you acknowledge they're being a nuisance, then you're showing them the power they have over you. But at the same time, you acknowledge your enemy the minute you start thinking about them. It's already acknowledged in your own mind. So it happens. So you have to express. How would you deal with them? I'm a person that tries to have no enemies. But in the event you do, you try to reason as much as you possibly can and keep things as specific as possible. Um,
Yeah.
my enemies, if I had them, are racism, bigotry, discrimination, and bullshit. I'm allergic to bullshit, like fanaticism, right? That's an enemy.
Yeah, that was good. American Indians, indigenous say your enemy's your best teacher.
Yeah, that
And
makes
I mean,
sense.
yeah, it might not be the best, but you can learn. So James Joyce was the first projectionist in Dublin 100 years ago. A Volta Cinema, he basically checked out. He said, "This is stupid. Why should I go inside a building and see a movie of a tree when I can go outside and see a real tree?" Years later, Faulkner said, "Sometimes the best fiction is more true than journalism." Why do we have to recreate things in order to get them? Why do we have to go to a theatrical play of people acting out life? Why don't we just live life?
I think it's a mixture of two. I think life imitates art and art imitates life. And sometimes we get different. Like you look at a movie like Life is Beautiful, and you get a totally different take on the Holocaust based on, a father's love for his son, and he turns it into a game. But nobody at that time, if we just went by real life, nobody would have thought of it that way and turned it upside its head and told a beautiful tale about how much a father loves his son. So we have to see these things from different angles rather than just how they are. We have to see them from all sides that we can, and sometimes a recreated world based on life that's imitated allows us to do that.
Yeah.
And it gives us experiences, or it creates thoughts in our head that leads to new experiences.
Again, well put. Thank you so much. And walk me through a little, Danny. What was your tipping points to go, I want to be a writer, tipping point, I want to be a film producer? What did you grow up reading and seeing where you went, I want to do that? And then where was the tipping points?
So it was definitely reading Edgar Allan Poe as a 17-year-old. I had a big orange book of Poe's collective works, and I read them all. And I just kept saying to myself, I want to do that. I didn't know I would write for film until I got to college. In college, I got voted funniest man on campus at the University of New Mexico. I opened a show for Colin Quinn, and the people just went crazy. And then the theater department invited me in and taught me how to write sitcoms. And the creator of Laugh-In was there, Digby Wolfe, the late Digby Wolfe, bless his soul. And he came and taught me how to write sitcoms. So that's how I became a writer. The producing part happened later. I got to LA the first time was 2005. I was living in your Venice Beach, and I was working for the Wedding Crashers producers as an intern. And they taught me development, and I saw how well they did with their film, and I knew that was something that I would want to do eventually. And I decided to put my energy and efforts to learning how to produce.
Go ahead.
And then I ended up going to the UCLA professional producing program about 3 years ago, and it really solidified. And I've set a goal of making a short every year, at least one short a year. And yeah, that's how it came to be about.
You're doing great, dude. And I wish we could time travel, or you could talk to Digby from the grave and ask him. There's a line in Laugh-In where they go, "What you doing, Marshall McLuhan?" And it's like, who wrote that? I wonder if it's Digby. It could have been.
It's possible. He was that kind of thinker, actually.
Yeah. But let's just go to comedy for a second. You were opening for Colin Quinn at like a concert. Were you doing stand-up comedy already?
So we had this little theater that's called the Lobo, and it used to be a movie theater, but they couldn't make it as a movie theater. Then they turned it into a comedy club. So I went there in October of 2000, and I went there knowing nobody. I put in a killer performance. It was my first time ever doing it. I had written material before then, and I was asked to headline the week after. And then the place kind of shut down because they weren't making enough money. And my parents were telling me, you can't risk your grades to make $40 a night. And then April 2001 came along, and Colin Quinn was having an open mic before his show. And all these people dropped the leaflets in front of my door. Okay, we've seen you do the comedy. We know you did it there. Go do it. And so I went. It was in a big, huge psychology hall. where I normally would fall asleep during psychology class, right? Psych 101. And we were there performing, and it was in front of maybe like 1,000 people. And I really got the place going. There was another person I competed with, and I just smashed them. And I got to write about it in the school paper the next day.
Wow. But who'd you grow up that had influence on you comedy wise?
Richard Pryor more than anybody.
Yeah.
And then Eddie Murphy Delirious and Eddie Murphy Raw. But Richard Pryor more than anyone. Just you know, I mean, you grew up during that time too.
Yep.
Like Richard Pryor was incredible.
What's the function of laughter?
Cope.
You are smart. You're concise and smart, dude. Cope. That is good. Yeah. Gurdjieff said the function of laughter is to reconciliate yes and no. You know.
Yeah.
That's so yeah, and then Steve Allen says behind every joke there's a grievance.
Yeah, and the truth.
Yeah. Yeah, maybe we'll get more into comedy too, but let's move on. So screenwriting teacher told me great art is when you can clearly see the intention of the maker. Stanley Kubrick says the opposite. Great art is great films when you can clearly not see the intention of the maker. What role does intention play when you're writing a screenplay?
I just try to think of what the characters need in order to be happy or to get some sort of resolution. So I intend for them to have a resolution, but I don't intend anything before I start. I just get going. And then, I mean, so much of what intention is now, because people tell you the 3-act structure and people intend to have this by page 27 and this by page 50. So, you know, intention has changed in terms of what the writer's intention is now. But I just mainly intend to get my characters to as organic a place as possible, so that it's not formulaic, and so that it seems like a natural progression or an organic progression of what would happen in real life. And it's hard to do given how many rewrites you got to do, you know?
Tell me a film that you think, or a screenwriter whose the characters were organic.
I mean, Michael Arndt
got to an organic place. Go ahead.
Okay. I think Michael Arndt. I think Little Miss Sunshine. I mean, the shirt that I'm even wearing, like Little Miss Sunshine shirt.
Yeah.
I think that was really one where the characters are organic. I genuinely believe that little girl wants to be Little Miss Sunshine. I genuinely believe her uncle has serious problems, and then her brother just lost his dreams because he broke his arm. Like, I fully buy that, and you could totally see that. I think he knocked it out the park, as they would say.
Beautiful.
With that.
Duchamp said there's no art without an audience. When you're writing your screenplay, how much are you thinking of your audience?
Not at all. I don't think of them until it's over. Like until after I've written the 100 pages. Or if it's a short, until after I've written the 10 to 15 pages. Because if you start thinking about who's going to like this, who's going to like that, like Bob Marley used to sing, you can fool some people sometime, but you can't fool other people all the time. So at that point, how do you know what's really going to work? You can't think about while you're creating what's going to work. You just have to make it and then think about it afterwards and see how it goes. And I love the process. I love when you get responses, because that's when you get an audience and see what happens. But I don't think about, will someone like this or that as I'm doing it. I tend not to do that.
But you mean test screening as a response, or
no? When you say, here, Jerry, here's my script. What do you think?
Right, pre-release, pre-finish.
Yeah. Development stage.
Development stage, yeah.
Yeah, like pre-release and development stage kind of audience response, right?
Yeah.
That's what I'm thinking about. But I don't think in terms of like, oh, will they like it or what will they like? I just go through it and then await those responses and then make the changes based on how an audience would react. But only after a first draft.
You only what?
Only after a first draft.
Only after first draft. Yeah. A lot of people don't know Harold Lloyd invented the pre-release press screening, the test screening in the 20s.
Wow.
But then in about the 50s or 60s, this psychology guy came in. And, you know, it's a debatable thing because then you're homogenizing art. you're changing art because from the audience
Yeah.
responding. But the best comment was Harry Shearer, the bass player for
Hmm.
pre-release test screening of Spinal Tap, and someone wrote on the card, "Good film, but you should have got a better rock band."
That's funny. Do you remember that film Scanner Darkly?
Yes.
The Philip K. Dick film? So I went to an early screening of that, and they asked us on the card, "Did you understand the film?"
Yeah.
Which I thought was like, what's going? I mean, were we not supposed to understand the film? Like,
You
what's
mean
going on?
that's Richard Linklater, right?
Yeah, Richard Linklater's Philip K. Dick film,
Yeah.
right? Yeah, Scanner
Amazing.
Darkly.
Amazing.
At the early
You mean
screening, they asked if we understood it.
right, but so you're saying that was a stupid question, or what are you saying to
Oh,
me
that
about
question blew me out the water. Like, what do you mean? Did I understand it? Yeah, I think I understood it. Like, how am I supposed to answer that? Do I just say yes, or do I give a detailed, like response of what happened and
right,
how I tie it all together?
right.
It's a beautiful film. It's a beautiful film.
Yeah, no, but I'm saying in the long run, if you made a film, would you avoid that question on your test screening, or you would use it?
I wouldn't use it.
You wouldn't use it, yeah.
No, it's gonna be
So,
too hard.
yeah, so McLuhan says everything we invent extends some humanness, like a human sensorium. So, knife and fork extend our teeth, clothing extends our skin, the shutter in a camera projector is an extension of our eyelid, and even non tangible like religion, philosophy, maybe extends consciousness.
Mhm.
What does the writing utensil extend for you? Whether it's a pen or a keyboard, what humanness does it extend?
I would say compassion,
Sheesh, that is amazing. Compassion.
because when you're creating characters, you have to understand what is the human being and what's the emotion. So you're extending compassion, and
Yeah.
whether your ending be, like a Fight Club ending where he blows everything up and you don't know how it's going to continue, or a happiness ending like Little Miss Sunshine, like you have there's compassion emoted from that character of
Yeah.
some sort. So I do think it's compassion, because we're writing about the human experience. How can you do that without having compassion for humans?
Yeah. Beautiful. Great answer. McLuhan said there's no such thing as a good or a bad movie. It's a good or bad viewing experience. Any comment?
I agree with that. It's a good or bad viewing experience. I would agree with that. I think too often we say it was a bad movie or good movie. I think it's good call to call it a good or bad viewing experience.
Boy,
I,
you're unique. Most people go, "No, I've seen bad movies." It's like, yeah, you can go to a bad movie and have a good time.
yeah,
If they
they miss the question then,
yeah, they miss it. See, you're a
because
good listener.
it is a viewing. I mean, what
Yeah,
are you doing? You're not.
right.
Yeah, right.
But you're a good listener. You listen to the question and you actually psychoanalyze the question before your answer comes out of your mouth. You're a sort of like a complete you use the word that McLuhan used the most. It's called understanding. But this is interesting because I know you have aesthetics and you have what movies you like, which you've gravitated towards, and some movies you might not like. So McLuhan said understanding is not having a point of view. So my friend puts this in music, but we could put it in film too, or books. Technique, theory, and taste. So technique, you learn how to do it. Theory, you know what you're doing. How does one acquire taste in books or films or music?
So this is like the artisan and artist question, right? Like the artisan learns how to recreate what the artist created. So in your time, because you're a little older than me, in your time, you went to museums because you were intrigued and that was the thing to do. Today, people are standing outside the Louvre because other people stood outside. So they're getting their taste isn't self accrued or stuff acquired. It's part of a larger culture. So it's like a pseudo taste or a pseudo culture. I think taste you build based on like a vast collection of viewings, of sightings, things you've seen. And I don't think there's a good or bad taste. We just all have we have various tastes. And then the ones that we come across, like when everyone decides, oh, Dali is this, we share that taste, and that person rises up based on how many people put that as part of their taste. But I think we build that. But I do believe there's too much of a fake taste right now, where people latch onto things to have like a pseudo kind of culture or fake like have a fake culture. It's like the idea of you're just reading the back of the book and not reading the book.
Yeah.
I think we have a lot of that happening.
Yeah, you really you touched on a lot of great things there, Danny. The first thing, bringing up museums. Two things I learned from studying McLuhan is museums without walls. And then he wrote a book called The City as Classroom. That,
Cool.
it's the entire environment that teaches you, because you can learn. I like that the Louvre. You can learn in the Louvre. You can learn outside the Louvre, and then you go to Banksy and you can learn. Or no, Damien Hirst says you can learn in the gift shop. Because he says, what kind of art do you like? He says, I like the little miniature postcards of Van Gogh better than the Van Gogh. Now,
Yeah.
I understand what you're saying. That's a substitute. But in essence, I experienced that seeing Francis Bacon, who's the big influence on David Lynch. I saw his paintings on art books and
Yeah.
on postcards and magazines. And then I saw one of his paintings
Blew
at
you
the
away.
I ran out of the museum. I couldn't look at it. It was too overwhelming because
Yeah,
it
he's a
was
great painter.
yeah. But the other thing you evoked was Harold Bloom's anxiety of influence. It's like, how do you absorb your influence and then abandon it? So you don't become a clone. Everybody loves the Coen brothers. I know they're good, but in my opinion, they're like Preston Sturges clones. And if I said that to them, they'd probably go, thanks for the compliment. But you know what I mean? It's like, how do you do that? How do you absorb? Because your influences well. How do you absorb them and then abandon them?
You you try to see that it doesn't become too much. Like okay, so many people think Godfather is the greatest movie ever made.
Yeah.
I don't agree with that, but I do think The Godfather's Notebook, which was how The Godfather was made, is one of the greatest books of all time.
Is it really? Who wrote that?
Well, it's Francis Ford Coppola, and what it is,
he wrote it?
It's The Godfather's Notebook. So it's a book, huge book, like very big, that has The Godfather in it, but all his writings on the side, and it shows you how he adapted the book, and it's a guideline for how I would adapt any other book after that. That's why, for me as a filmmaker, it's one of the greatest books ever written. But how you have to turn off when something becomes too much. For example, like if there's too much of a presence of some author in your work, you have to kind of tone that down and find your own voice. You can be influenced, but you can't be like just overtaken by it. You have to find your own voice. As a writer, as an artist, as a screenwriter, as a producer, you have to find yourself.
Yeah, because I've never really watched Christopher Nolan. I said, the dude's just a Kubrick wannabe. And again, he'd probably say, yeah, I appreciate it. It's a compliment, but I'm not giving him a fair shake. But
Memento was great.
Yeah.
I was a fantastic film.
He's very conscious of what he's doing. So I don't mean to put him down, but I just grab onto these cliches and blab.
No, I get it. That's the thing we were just talking about, when it becomes like the masses move to that way.
Yeah.
I think they almost lose value when they become cliche.
Well, go ahead. Sorry.
Because so many people try to replicate that.
Yeah.
And we don't want that replication.
But that's why McLuhan wrote a book, From Cliche to Archetype.
Mm.
Because that's what happens. So you don't want to make a value judgment. Oh, the cliche was better, the archetype's better. It's just that that's what happens. It's almost like this progression. So it's did you ever, I also heard this. I love your tip on the Godfather book. Yeah, I heard that the DVD for Godfather 2, the commentary track, is one of the most, amazing things to listen to.
I've
Have you
heard
ever?
that too. I haven't listened to it, but I've heard
Yeah,
that too.
yeah. So this is funny because you brought up story, narrative. There's a lot of things we could talk about here. The difference between story and narrative. But let me set it up with this because I come from experimental film world.
Yeah, I
And
read about that.
I'm not going to go into that too much, but I'm going to tell you what Peter Greenaway said, because Peter Greenaway did go into a mainstream art film realm. His films were known. And he said, cinema is much too rich a medium to be left to storytellers. So usually I ask these experimental filmmakers, are experimental films makers doing something different or just telling a story a different way? But I'm not going to ask you that. You can engage in that quote if you want. I asked it to Herzog once, and it was a funny thing. But I'm going to set it up with what Hollis Frampton said, another experimental filmmaker. Narrative is born among the animal necessities of the spirit because we are waiting to die.
Yeah.
So, maybe just talk about what's the difference between narrative and storytelling, and go wherever you want, with these ideas.
All right. Well, let's look at like, okay, so storytelling, narrative film, okay, but you can also tell a story through a documentary without telling a narrative of in that sense. So I think that it's both. I think both work. I don't think one is better than the other. I agree with the quote that we're just telling stories waiting to die. Um, but I do think you can make successful films without having a narrative.
Yeah, very good. Can you forget to die?
If you live forever,
That's a great answer.
God
Guys,
forgot to die.
who did?
God forgot to die.
God forgot to die. That's funny because this guy the other day said, that's a loopy question. People usually look at me weird when I say, can you forget to die? They go, what? You answered that well. That was good. So I talked to Michael Apted 40 years ago. He made a documentary on a Russian rock star. I says, why do rock video editors feel so obliged to edit fast? Most people don't know Abel Gance invented rapid montage in 1922, but it really flourished in 1980, starting with MTV. Michael Apted said, well, because we can learn to take in information. We've learned to take in information faster. And I asked this question with a bias. Can humans literally learn to take in information faster, or are we just brainwashed to believe we can?
Could be a mixture of the two. So if you think of how fast social media moves, you're being asked questions and solving problems much faster than we used to. We're solving them in real time. Let's say I have a stockbroker and I don't have access to like a gadget that can move. I have to call him, I have to think about it, and then things happen. And I'm thinking slower based on how fast those actions are happening. If I'm doing it with my hands right away, I'm thinking that much faster because I'm in the moment doing it. So I think that we can think we're moving faster, and we are actually moving faster because technology is pushing us to move faster. And then if you think about where we are in life, you think of like a 7-year-old girl whose parents let her be on Instagram. All the images she's seen, she's moving faster through life, even though she's only 7, because she's experiencing things through this social media that she wouldn't be experiencing till later on in her life otherwise. I bring it up because it came up with my doctor, because she said to me she had an 11-year-old daughter, and I said, oh my God, I feel for you. It's got to be so hard to be a girl, 11-year-old girl these days. And we talked about these things, but it's forcing us to move faster, definitely, and think faster. we don't even know if the brain can keep up with these things, but we're going to find out.
Yeah. Yeah, I curated a photo show, Venice History photo show once, and we had a 7-year-old girl in it. Looked at buddy's photos and said, I got mine from Google Images. Why wouldn't you get them from Google Images? And people would be like, "Oh, that's so horrible." It's like, no, that's her medium. That's to me, it was enlightening to hear that. Now she might develop an aesthetic and buy a camera and learn how to shoot photographs, but who's to make the value judgment? Oh, yours are taken by someone else. No, it was pure Marcel Duchamp. He said, the artist of the future will only have to point.
Yeah, it's true. It's true. We just move faster. The technology is forcing us to move faster. How quick we react, how quick we solve problems, solve issues.
Well, I learned also TSA, tactile situation awareness, is when a bomber pilot gets hit, they don't have time to look at all their gauges and figure out what to do. They have to make split-second decisions.
Yeah.
And my friend says, Bob Dobbs, in fact, he says that is what kids, younger people do now. They have, this social media device, this, and that, and they're not relating to just one. Like you gave a good example. You had to relate to and employ one device, a phone. And now they could do a phone, a laptop, and their cell, and
iPad, everything.
Everything, yeah.
I have 3 or 4 gadgets going at once. It's crazy.
Yep.
I think it's too much. But I don't know how it's going to slow down. But we'll see what happens.
But is it literally possible to multitask?
I believe so. I mean, let's say your wife texts you right now and you're interviewing me. You look down, you tell her, let's have this for dinner, and you ask me another question. That's a multitask.
That's because you caught me, because all I do is take notes, and I know that people think, why does he keep looking down? He's not giving eye contact.
Oh no, I don't think so.
I show a pen, and I hope they're thinking that. But it's totally true. I interviewed a woman about 4 or 5 months ago, and I asked her that question, and she said, I'm checking my email as you're interviewing me. She admitted it, and it was sort of like, not insulting, but I was sort of sad because I want her to be participant. But usually if people wear glasses, you can tell when people are doing on Zooms, when they're doing other things.
Well, you have my full attention, and I know you're taking notes because I saw you take notes when we met. So I know you always take notes, dude.
I'm an old school person taking.
I love it. Well, I got them too. I mean, right? Take notes too.
Well, but here's a funny thing, Danny. That really, when I've lectured, this was years ago, and students were on their laptop, they could have been taking notes. But I'm old school. If they were taking notes with a pen, it wouldn't distract me. But if they took notes with their laptop, now they could be writing a love note to their friend on their laptop or their pen. They could be diddling with their pen, but I think because a pen meant, from my sensibility. So that was a bias I immediately realized. And it's like curating films for years. When cell phones came out, I was so mad. I says, take your cell phone in the lobby if you got to do it during the film. And this person yelled at me and says, my dad's dying. I have to monitor. And it's like, well, you should be monitoring it out in the lobby. But I didn't want to make a value. I mean, she got me. And I says, okay. But the thing that happened is I realized people can't watch the big screen unless they know they have this small screen in their hand, because that's just part of who they are. So to literally tell people to turn their cell phone off during a film, and I go to USC, I go to the colleges, and they don't even say don't do your cell phone, because everybody's flashing their screen, and it's like irritating. And I don't go, could you use your cell phone out in the lobby? I move my seat and hope the
Oh yeah,
next
yeah.
person, because it's not worth it. They will freak out, like, don't tell me what to do, you know.
So I'll tell you a story like that. I was I went to a Steve Sondheim program, playwriting program, in 2000, summer 2000, and we saw Shakespeare in the Park. We saw King Lear, and there was a woman who was talking on a cell phone, and another woman behind her told her to stop, stop, stop. And finally, she got up and knocked the cell phone out of her hand against her head, and everyone just clapped. And at that point, I realized, don't bring cell phones in the theater. That could be you. Don't do it. But
Yeah.
I learned like 20 years ago, early on, when before cell phones were like a huge thing, like not to do that. How rude that was.
Well, it was rude, but it was also rude how she handled it. And
No,
it's beautiful.
absolutely, absolutely.
But it's beautiful that she had the balls to do that, because the other woman could have pulled out a gun and shot her,
Yeah, of course.
you know, and
Yeah, of
then there
course.
could have been mass. I mean, I showed a Dustin Makaveyev film in Ann Arbor, Michigan in the mid-50s, and this is all college students, and there was two winos in there, and one of them said, "This is the greatest film I ever saw," and the other one says, "This is the worst film I ever saw," and they started beating each other up, and I had to stop the screening. It was an aesthetic arrest.
That's hilarious.
So, what was the motive? What's your hunch was the motive of the cave artist?
Survival.
Wow. What's more important, conviction or compromise?
Conviction. Because if you don't have conviction, then your compromise is not worth anything. Someone has to know what you're giving up, and without conviction, they don't have something you're giving up. If you're
Yeah.
all about something and then stop and say, okay, I'll let it go, it has more value. But if you're just willing to compromise, then it's not as big a compromise, and it lacks value, I believe.
In your accomplishments, how do you rate these three elements? Luck, skill, and ambition. What played the biggest role, second and third?
Ambition led me to luck, led me to skill.
Really well put. T.S. Eliot said, poetry is outing your inner dialogue. What language is your inner dialogue in?
English.
What form is your inner consciousness in?
Probably Spanish.
Wow. Now, again, those are two languages. Another, more like what form is it in? That's not a specific language. Like a
Like
more
like
a
pictures, just pictures, pictures.
yeah,
Like sticks, little sticks moving kind of deal. Because I
yeah,
wasn't a good artist. So
yeah.
it's just kind of little sticks moving around.
Oh, I like that. And I did want to give a shout out to Lucien
Lucian.
Zell. This
Yeah,
is his
great poet.
great poet who basically introduced us. What's the function of poetry?
Smiles. Smiles for days. I just think of Shakespeare's Summer Sonnet. I think of Lucian's poetry. Like, Lucian could be the Van Gogh of poetry generation. Like, I've known how good this guy was since 2001, when he told me, he wrote in a book to me, he wrote, waterfalls aren't so much about water as they are about falling.
Oh, God.
And it blew my mind. Another one was something he said about how perplexed the horse was when the man asked if he wanted a ride. Like these kind of things. He was like a guru to me. I went and visited him in Prague after I met him. So in 2002, I visited him in Prague, and then I visited him again in 2003. And then we just kept contact through social media and email and things like that. But he, for those who don't know, like, he's just an absolute fantastic poet, probably the most unsung poet out there.
Yeah. And also kudos to Peggy for holding the Ulysses event here in LA, which brought me to meet Lucien and then met you. Two more poetry questions, and I look forward because I'm going to be interviewing him with all these same questions. So It'll be fun.
Oh,
Gary
great.
Gary Snyder said the task of a poet is entails the work of seeing the world without language, then putting that seeing into language, which
Yeah.
is an amazing thing. But this is the one I'd like you to comment on. Leo Bersani studied Mallarmé, the great symbolist poet, and he said, the very crises which threatens the writing of poetry sustains poetic composition. Now, it could apply to anything like what you're writing. The very crises which threatens the writing of a screenplay sustains screenplay composition.
Yeah.
Any comment on that idea? It's a little,
It's a great idea. I mean, suppose suppose the crisis is that there's not enough good ones. Then all of a sudden people will start writing like crazy and it sustains.
yeah,
If that was the crisis. So I believe that the crisis threatens and then sustains what's happening.
yeah,
I mean, I mean, you think of Einstein too, because Einstein writes that our greatest, like, said something to the effect that our greatest accomplishments come during moments of crisis, when we're faced with crisis. So it takes crisis for man to survive. So that's what sustains us. Because if everything was all good all the time, we wouldn't know what life was.
yeah.
I mean, so it's a crisis that sustains us because it makes us think, makes us write, and makes us. If there's a like a lack of good, then we try to write like crazy and create, and we sustain, we find it.
Leads perfectly into this, Danny. Moshe Feldenkrais works with healing and movement. He says it's literally possible to identify a weakness and incorporate it to become a strength rather than we're normally taught to overcome a weakness. Tell me a weakness you turned into a strength.
So I try to do too much. That's a weakness.
Yeah.
You try to overextend yourself, but you turn it into a strength by becoming better organized in the sense of a calendar, in the sense of using technology that's out there like Google Calendar or iCalendar. So that makes it easier and has strengthened me and made me better. But my
Yeah.
weakness is trying to do too much.
Yeah.
Because life is finite. You know that. I know that. Human
Yeah.
life is finite. So we try to do as much as we can, but that could be too much.
Yeah. Like when I meet somebody like you and we start talking, I want to tell you everything I know because you've got big ears and you're attentive. And Bob Dylan said, never tell anyone everything you know. And he learned that from the Bible. It's like, what? But if you find someone youthful and energetic, you want to just, like you did with Lucien that one night, you stayed up
Yeah.
all night and talked,
Yeah. He was a huge influence to me, like as an artist and as a person. It's how to be a good person. And
Yeah.
as far as you and I go, I'll take the trip to Venice and learn from you. And I don't think I could live another like 50 years and know everything that you know.
Dude, I'm ready to hire you to make a feature film. So this was a good meeting. It was like our whatever they call these pre-production meetings in Hollywood.
Oh, sure. But no, we'll definitely see each other. We'll definitely see each other at events. I'll come see you. We'll definitely see each other.
I'm ready. So two of my film heroes, George Manupelli started the Ann Arbor Film Festival 60 years ago. It's like half the length of the medium. And his mantra is ignore yourself. Jonas Mekas says there is no self-expression. And Cecil Taylor, the great jazz pianist, says, I'm just a vehicle and this stuff just comes through me. It's a stupid question. It's basically both, and it depends. But basically, I would love to hear your thoughts on it. Is art making more self-expression or more your vehicle for whatever technology, culture, and environments are dominant?
I think it's more a vehicle because I think the ultimate self-expression is sex, making love, and I think unless you're writing a biopic about yourself, I don't think you're self-expressing. Or unless you're putting political views into a film, okay, you're self-expressing those. But I do think it's a vehicle based on whatever technology is available to us at the time. I
Yeah,
don't think the first caveman, when he drew the hieroglyphs, I don't think he was expressing for himself. I think he was, that was the vehicle by which to make life better for the others.
that's good. Can art making be ego?
Yes. I mean, if you look at something like what Apocalypse Now became, right? It became like a struggle to get the film made, people doubting whether the director could do it, and then it becomes an ego thing for him to get it done. So I do think art can become ego, especially if you're trying to convince people. Like, so all artists have doubters, right? Their family saying you're not going to make it. You know this, or someone else saying they're not going to make it. The artist has to do it because they love it. They have to do it for the love of silence, not the hate of noise.
Yeah.
Not to drown out the people that say you can't do it. You have to do it for love of what you're doing. So I think there is some ego involved, but you have to let that go. You have to just make and go on to the next one. Let it go.
Where'd you get that line, for silence, not for the hate of noise?
That's my own.
Dude, that's amazing original. I'm going to send you my silence essay. I wish I could add it. It's
because
really,
because right now I have an animated series that I've gotten the artwork for, that I've written the pilot for with a co-writer, and there's so many people around us saying yes, this is going to go, no, this isn't going to go, and we're just talking to each other. And I said to him exactly what I just told you. I said, we have to do this for love of silence, not for hate of noise. You got to just do this because you love it, and that'll quiet them. You're not going to get where you are to spite someone else. You're going to get where you are because you love what you do.
totally it. Really well put. Is perception reality?
It's perception, the reality of the person perceiving. So I don't think perception becomes reality until all of us agree that it's there. Suppose I'm in a room and I drop flatulence, then everyone looking around then realizes that there was flatulence, and that perception becomes a part of reality. So I so I think once perception is agreed upon, it becomes part of reality. But it's all part like collective reality. But perception is our own reality, and then how we project that on others is what affects reality.
Yeah, I wish you could have met my friend Timothy Carey. He was in 2 Kubrick films and 2 John Cassavetes films.
Amazing.
And he became uh uh he was really outspoken, and he became what I call a fart freak. He talked about farting openly
Mhm.
from Salvador Dali's book, because you brought up Dali twice. I had
Yeah,
to tell you this because Dali talks in one of his books about the bricklayer's fart and the bourgeois fart. And so Tim's at an audition, and I mean, he worked with Elia Kazan, everybody. I mean, 2 of the greatest, Cassavetes, and you have
yeah,
4 films, 2 with Cassavetes and 2 Kubricks. That's a pretty good resume.
that's amazing.
And he manhandled James Dean in East of Eden. And so he's at an audition once, and the woman says, "Do you mind if I smoke?" And he turns to her and he goes, "Do you mind if I fart?"
It's crazy. Hilarious.
So tell me one major element of your writing, producing, that's changed, and one major element that stayed the same.
Okay, what's changed is how we, like from producing standpoint, what's changed is how we build like the everything. People want things in package now. Like I got Jerry, and I got Jerry to direct, and I got Prodigal Son to act, and then bring that to somebody. So it's
Right.
changed that way. I'm old school. I think if you have a great script, that should attract everything,
Yeah.
because I don't care if you have the biggest actor in the world. If it's Tom Cruise and a goldfish, no one cares. So
Yeah.
I think script is everything. So in that way, it's changed. The producing's changed. People like more packages than they do like actual good scripts. Um, the writing, I think it's changing in the sense that, like, okay, so So I'm all inclusive in all these kind of things, right? I've always
Yeah.
have been, but I think people are trying to become like forcibly all inclusive
Yeah.
to where you can tell that it's manufactured and
Yeah.
unnatural. So I
Yeah.
think that's changed.
Yeah.
Like you'd see a character that you wouldn't see before. Yes, we want to integrate that character, but we don't want it forced upon us.
Yeah.
And I think I think a lot of writing now has characters or situations forced upon us that don't necessarily come about organically, that come more about because we want to show that we're with the times.
Yeah.
I think that's the biggest change in writing that I'm
Yeah.
aware of.
It's good. Well put. Lewis Carroll says, I believe as many as 6 impossible things before breakfast. Have you believed good. Have you believed in any impossible things lately?
So I'm of the theory that believing and attempting the impossible, you get to the possible.
Yeah.
So every morning I think it's going to be impossible that I get this animated show made, and it
Yeah.
gets me closer and closer to the possible. Like those are that I have a career out here is the impossible that I believe in every morning.
Yeah.
I just something that inspired me that I saw last night, for example, was a Derek Jeter documentary, the first part, and it's called The Captain. And all his life, from when he was like 5, 6 years old, he told himself he would be shortstop for the New York Yankees. And people yelled at his parents for why did they let him have this dream. And his grandma introduced him to the Yankees because she lived in New Jersey. And sure enough, by the time he was in his 20s, he was a shortstop for the New York Yankees. So you have to believe that impossible to get to the possible, and you have to attempt the impossible to get to the possible.
If you don't have dreams, your dreams can't come true.
It's true, and you have to believe in yourself
Yeah.
absolutely all the way through.
Sun Ra, the great jazz shaman, said, the impossible attracts me because everything possible has been done and the world didn't change.
Exactly, that's a beautiful quote. Oh, I wish I had that quote. That's amazing.
Anger can be a productive emotion when fill in the blank.
When used to quell hate, when you,
Wow.
yeah,
Is hate innate or invented?
I think hate's invented. I think I don't know. Like my grandfather tried to figure out the origins of hate and wrote a book about it that I have to translate from German that I haven't fully read yet, and it goes like hundreds of years back to like sort of Constantinople, and these things. I think it's learned. I think it's learned. I mean, if
Yeah.
you have a black kid and a white kid together, not until they're exposed to media and all this crap do they realize that they have like quote unquote problems. Or like I think someone in Alabama is teaching their kids something different than someone's teaching them in California. So I think these things are learned.
Yeah. Yeah, definitely study Maria Gumbutis, the right UCLA anthropologist. And she's not totally accepted, but she basically tried to prove that there were cultures that had no warfare. And so it's hard to prove that, but she went on this, she spawned Rian Eisler's book, The Chalice and the Blade, and this stuff about, women, Gaia theory, and that goes right to this question. What caused matriarchy?
Ooh. A disbelief in man,
That's good.
being sick and tired of man, the patriarchy. I mean, just think of how different everything would be built, right? We often think about this. Like my mentor used to joke about this, the late Hector Torres. He would joke that the buildings would be caves and we wouldn't have buildings going up, we wouldn't have phallic symbols, all that stuff. But I think the matriarchy is caused by the petulance of the patriarchy.
Yeah, very good. There's a saying that goes, you create what you resist. The comedian Bob Goldthwait morphed it into, you are what you hate. James Joyce said, it's a curious thing how your mind is super saturated with the religion in which you say you disbelieve. And Louis Buñuel nailed it. He said, "Thank God I'm an atheist." So how do you react? I'm not saying you, Danny, but just how do you react to this idea? You create what you resist, or one creates what one resists.
No, it's true, because it's the other, right? When it's the thing that we don't mention, um, we create what we resist. Like what we talk bad about, we create. Like we build it. We create what we resist. When
Yeah.
we write characters that do a certain thing, that's what we're afraid of. In that way, and it's possible as writers. Um, I don't know how much it's, and it's possible as poets too, right? Writing in every sense. I don't know how much it is in art. I mean, maybe in Dali, because when Dali has the melted time and all that, he's creating what he resists, which is the world running out of time and not listening to each other before war. So I think that's one painter that could nail right off the bat that is creating what he resists.
Oh yeah.
Yeah,
Beautiful.
but I think we do that. We definitely do
Yeah.
that, whether we're conscious of it or not.
I mean, you like get every question, you listen to it, and you're able to really articulate. It's really amazing. I appreciate this. How do you find peace of mind?
Meditation. I really love the program Calm, CALM. It's like I paid $40 for a year of meditations, and there's 3 to 5 meditations a day. They're about 10 minutes long. You can just sit or lay and listen to them, and I use that. Both LeBron James and RZA are on there, so you have RZA's like music that helps you fall asleep, and you hear from LeBron James about focus he has in different games, and it helps you fall asleep or it helps you meditate as well, because it gets really in detail. It was game 6 of this series. I was catching the ball with 13.2 seconds left. I saw the number 4 on his jersey. I tucked my elbow. Like, it gets really in detail.
Wow.
But it really helps me. It's helped me to meditate and be calm. But I find peace by meditation through calm.
If you were walking down the street today, you met yourself as a 12-year-old, what would you say to your 12-year-old self?
Right, 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 right.
With the WR.
Yeah, yeah, yeah. With the WR. Go right, go right, go right. Use a pen. Go right. Because I think the most important thing for kids and young people, like college students, like 18 to 22, but the earlier the better. Like, once you know what it is you want to do, gear yourself towards that. If I
Oh, yeah.
knew, if I'd known by 17 I wanted to be a screenwriter, I would just come to LA, go to Santa Monica College, get all A's, and go to UCLA. But
Yeah.
I didn't know about those things,
Yeah.
And that's advice I give to people that now think about college or want to write or do those things.
Yeah.
And you know the same. You've had the same kind of experience. How old were you when you knew you wanted to make films?
I knew right off the bat I never wanted to. And then when I turned 65, I thought, well, I might as well my attitude was, why would you ever want to take a photograph? I just want to capture life real.
Sure.
So I could have been a great photographer, maybe. And then why would I ever want to make a film? I show films and talk about films. There's enough of films made. So anyways, it's funny. I'm glad you asked that, but I don't want to do. People ask me. I lectured it before a bunch of students at Cal Arts once, and this girl says, "So what do you do? For your job? How do you make your money?" I go, "I do nothing effectively." In the audience cracked up. They loved it, but she gave me an evil eye that I will never erase out of my consciousness, because she knew I was like, it was a bullshitty, playful answer. She wanted to know, like, well, what do you do, to make a living and pay your rent? So it's important, but it's funny because I'm now going to the Zen Cohen guy, Alan Watts. These are 5 quick Alan Watts questions, really short, in a few words. Who started it all?
God.
Are we going to make it?
Yes.
Where do we put it?
Trash can.
Very good. Who's cleaning it up?
We are the public.
Is it serious?
Very serious.
Dude, you are great. This is so fun. Which way should toilet paper come off the roll, over or under?
As long as it's there.
If a publisher was to release your autobiography off the top of your head, what will be?
What would the title be?
Yeah.
Could have done more.
They want to scent the glue in the binding. What smell?
Hemp.
If a statue was built in your honor, where would you want it displayed and what would it be made of?
I'd want it displayed where my grandparents have this thing called Doppelsteiner. So they're golden stones for Jews that died in the Holocaust or Jews that escaped. And I'd wanted a little stone made of gold that just said I survived.
Oh, that is beautiful, dude. Really touching. Tell me something good you never had and you never want.
Something good I never had, never want. Peanut butter covered strawberries. I don't know.
It's good. You never had it, never wanted. All right. If you were in a vat of vomit up to your neck and someone threw a bag of shit at your face, what would you do?
Take it all in.
Oh, you are a man. I have to tell you one little quickie anecdote about, because you talked about German Jew. One of my mentors lived till he's almost 100, was a German Jew. And at 16, 17, he's living in Germany and Hitler comes to his town and he's the photographer for the local newspaper. And they go to shoot a picture of Hitler. So Hitler gets out of the limo and Alfred puts his camera up like this and Hitler looks into the lens and Alfred's finger won't push down because he says, I knew if that guy knew I was a Jew, he would, it wouldn't be a good. So he froze and it wouldn't do it. Then Hitler went to the town square and he took a bunch of pictures, but I thought you'd get a kick out of that. Amazing.
Amazing.
Having, you want that drive. What I see in you is this amazing, courageous drive. And it doesn't matter if you succeed, that you're just driven. And that's my question is, what does courage mean to you now?
It means just going forward no matter what.
Yeah.
Yeah. And then I found another good answer to that question. You said, what's something extremely good that you've never had? Extreme fame.
Yeah. Well, that's good. I'll tell you, the three answers I get the most are fame, money, and heroin. A couple more and we're out of here, dude.
Perfect.
What's the cultural shift you see developing today that inspires you?
I think people are moving too fast, so it inspires me to kind of slow it down a notch and tell stories in between before people move too fast.
Yeah.
Life's going by too fast, so I've got to make some stories that tell it back together.
Take a deep breath and relax.
Exactly. And that show the value of family.
Oh, yeah.
Yeah.
Family. So important. Thornton Wilder, 1928, he said, art is confession. Art is the secret told. But art is not only the desire to tell one's secret, it's the desire to tell it and hide it at the same time. You've laid your cards on the table for 90 minutes, Danny. I'm not insinuating you haven't answered this, but what's it really all about for you?
Giving away. Making it and giving it away. If I can get this animated show sold, I would just go to schools and start teaching people how to write and how and get animators with screenwriters so they know how to create things like that. I mean, my main goal is like to sell a couple and then to go back and teach what people didn't get taught and just
Yeah.
to give back. That's all I want to do. It's just to give it away. My secret
What
is I want to give it all away.
Yeah. Red Hot Chili Peppers, right? Give it away, give it
Give
away.
it away, exactly.
Dude,
Not
I weaned Johnny Frusciante in this very room when he was 16 before he became a rock star. But go ahead. What were you just going to say?
I was just gonna say, not in that you get a check way, right?
Yeah.
Not like Oprah, but in a
Yeah.
way that really fortifies and stimulates the next generation. Like, what would I tell someone who's 18 wants to do the things that I'm trying to do? What would I tell a 22-year-old? What would I tell a 25-year-old? What would I tell a 28-year-old? These kind of things. I myself, I'm 41, so it's like, what would I tell
Yeah.
younger people trying to? That's who I want to give it away to, and the underprivileged, like people who haven't had the voice, that should have voice.
You got a great attitude. And I got a bonus question. Do you have time to go a few minutes over? Great. This McLuhan in 57. It's misleading to suppose there's any basic difference between education and entertainment. Then he goes, its distinction merely relieves people of their responsibility of looking into the matter. It's like setting up the distinction between didactic and lyric poetry on the ground that one teaches and the other pleases us. So we want to do this thing. Well, that teaches and that pleases. However, this is the key line I would love you to react to. However, it's always been true, whatever pleases teaches more effectively.
That's true.
You think so? Yeah.
That's true, because if it pleases, it means it's had an effect, and then people learn from it. And I also think that, I look at the world as a text. Everything we see is what we read. What we hear is what we read. So we live in a textual world. So everything is always educating us.
Yeah.
It's just a whole bunch of video footage that's all together that educates us, makes us think things we never thought before. Poems do the same. Artwork does the same. It's just art. Art puts us in places and has us experience things we've never had before. And it's a primary educational tool of this world. I don't think there's any other tool that causes as much thought or thinking. And if that wasn't true, people wouldn't go to movie houses, and they wouldn't go to museums. They wouldn't go to poetry readings. They wouldn't buy books. So art is the all educator.
Yeah. But it is amazing what you brought up is Auden, the poet Auden's statement is basically the mystery of art is that we don't know it if it activates or pacifies us.
Yeah.
And so, like Bertolt Brecht, he lived right here in Pacific Palisades. He says, I don't want art that that trances me. I want art that activates me. But if you had art that puts you in a trance, it could eventually lead to being active. So we don't know that mystery. Yeah. In what you said also evoked this. It used to be the cliche is seeing is believing. And then it flipped a couple of years ago. They go, no, people only believe what they see because they already got their reality tunnels on. So they're only seeing what they already believe to reinforce it. So sometimes you got to shock people, as McLuhan learned, you needle the somnambulism that art or whatever puts you into. A tool puts you into somnambulism, Netflix, whatever, anything can put you into somnambulism. How do you get out of that? So last question, Danny, truly been enlightening, and I'm so grateful.
Me too.
What gives you the most optimism?
Humanity.
Yeah.
The beauty of humanity. That I can go out and meet someone like you and do something like this. That there's people like Lucian and Peggy who put together artwork for others to see. That there's someone like Mila Kunis who raises 35 million or more for Ukraine. That there's Germans going to Ukraine to drive them to Germany. That there's Poles. I mean, all these kinds of things do it for me.
Yeah.
That there's people willing to join United Nations and like go work in refugee camps. I mean, all of this still gives hope, even though situations are so dire.
Beautiful. You know, Danny, the question is a full circle cyclical thing. The first question I asked is, what's the best thing for a human being? And my friend studied Wilhelm Reich, and he said the best thing for a human being is another human being. And the last question is, what gives you the most optimism, which is what they asked Groucho Marx at the end of his life. And he said, what gives you the most optimism? He says, other people.
Yeah,
You know, humanity. So it's like he spent his life cutting down other people, but indeed he needed them. He needs people. We need each other. So
absolutely.
yeah, I'm going to hit the stop button now, but I hope this never stops. Let's keep the dialogue going.
We have
Thank
each
you.
other's emails. We have each other's emails. Let's start having lunches together or something. Just so I
Anytime.
just so I can learn from you as much as possible, and so I
Hey,
can put things in your hand, have you look at things.
yeah. Hey,
So
I'm a student, so I'm only here to learn more. So you've already taught me a lot, but we will reach out and in touch again. Give me a high five
yeah,
soon.
yeah, 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 absolutely. Absolutely.
All
You're a
right, Dan.
beautiful, beautiful, beautiful person, Jerry.
Oh, Danny, it is mutual, man. I know when an interview like this works when I tear up, and there were like several times when I teared up, and you really hit my heart deep.
You ask questions that only my mentor was capable of asking. Like Hector Torres was a deconstructionist. He was a Latino Chicano writer,
Yeah.
and his life was cut short when he was 54, when he was killed by his the love of his life's ex-boyfriend,
Wow.
and we lost him at University of New Mexico. But the things you asked me were questions Hector would ask me about life. So I
Wow.
felt like I was talking to a great friend, and in turn, you are a great friend. So there you go.
Thank you, Danny. It's totally mutual. Thank you so much. I appreciate it. Later, brother. I love you.
I love